Wired Axcess.
We'll do it live.
Wired Access.
Do it live.
Wired Access.
We'll do it live.
Wired Axcess.
Welcome to Wired Access Podcast with your host, JK Dub Omaha. This is a little different for me. Normally, I'm at the studio recording, but today I am at the Hurrdat Sports Bar, where I'll be this Saturday as well for the Omaha Beef. Celebration of the NAL films of the championship game. You can come out to Hurrdat Sports Bar in LaVista. That's right there, LaVista location. Come check it out. It's where they recap the game, kind of like the old school NFL films that no longer happens after a Super Bowl. I don't know about you, but that was something that I was always into. I have today as my guest, I have former coach, father, TJ McDougal. And TJ, the reason I wanted to bring you on is, one, you made a very impactful part of my son's life, but not just my son, many other kids. And obviously, you're a former football player that played at a high level. You have family that have been all the way up to the NFL. And you're giving a lot of guidance to a lot of local athletes here to try to project them, along with your own family. You have your son, who is now a senior, who has went through a traumatic injury, but is now back ready for his senior year and ready to show Omaha what he can do. And then, of course, you have daughters where you get to be the girl dad, and you get to go enjoy that. As of course, you know, I just wrapped up high school, so I don't have first day of school, and it sucks. No matter what anybody says, I know it sounds good, I know it sounds great, but it sucks. Welcome to the show, TJ. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you. Yeah, it is the first day of school for Papillion South. So I have my son, who's a senior, football, baseball player there, and my daughter, who's our show choir ace and musical theater ace, and then we have our youngest, who just started sixth grade. So kind of inching towards those phases that you just went through, and I don't know what next year is going to look like, but it should be interesting with one completely out the door.
Now let's really start where you start. I mean, you're a son of a former coach in Colorado, so being a coach's son isn't easiest sometimes, but it is also something that you took really to heart. How much you really wanted to do good for dad. You really wanted to do good for coach, you know, and like it adds up. Some people can handle that pressure. Some people can't. When you talk about a father-son connection in that aspect where you're the son, what's some of the things you remember growing up that is kind of maybe a little different than today's age?
Well, I think first and foremost, our whole family was involved in athletics. My sisters all played college soccer. My brother played college lacrosse. I was lucky enough to play college football. My cousins, like you mentioned, one played for the Indianapolis Colts, a bunch of them at Colorado State, a swimmer at USD. Just pretty much the whole family was immersed in it. So growing up with dad, you know, he was a defensive coordinator, and he also was a baseball coach. And so I lived on the sidelines. That was my babysitting, was the players, you know, and being the ball boy, and Friday nights, you know, passing off those ball boy duties to go play in the back of the end zones with some of the other kids occasionally. But I mean, what you see every day is you see the care that coaches have for kids. You see the time and energy and effort that it takes to do it at a good level. And where my dad coached, the school had I think 20 straight losing seasons before he became the defensive coordinator. And the school was bad enough at football that on the front page of the Denver Post sports section, and you got the Broncos, you have all those teams there, but the front page of the Denver Post sports section said, "Holy cow, Holy Family's 500" when they went to 2-2. That's how bad the high school I went to was at the time. And he was lucky enough to be the head coach there. Mr. Mike Gabriel, who's in the Colorado High School Hall of Fame, was the head coach. And his kids were, I was sandwiched between all his kids. So we kind of grew up one big family between the Gabriel family, the McDougal family, team dinners, everything. We hung out together. We grew up together. His son was a senior when I was a freshman and was our quarterback. His other son was a year younger than me. And so we saw it a little bit differently than other kids, because we saw those late night film sessions. We saw the heartache when a kid had an injury. We saw the heartache when a family couldn't afford things. We saw what these guys did, these men did for these kids day in, day out, and it just leaves an indelible mark on you, no matter your career path. And I think those things are taken a little bit for granted, how big a heart coaches have for kids and what they're willing to do. And we've been blessed with a lot of great coaches who've done those things for my son. And, you know, in the show choir world with my daughter, I would call them coaches too. And it was unique growing up. The thing that is different, to answer that question, is I think the access to coaches. I mean, we had an open door policy at our house. We lived blocks away from the school. I remember people coming to our front door knocking because a girl broke up with them and they want to talk to my dad. Things like that, where now, I mean, these kids, they're doing group me, or they're, you know, messaging coaches. And I think anymore it's become a 24/7 cycle for these coaches. And even though it was back in the day, it was just different because it was face to face. You know, they would come and knock on the door. Hey, is your dad here? We had that type of relationship, my dad, with the players, and that was a beautiful thing. And I think some of that still exists. It's just a little bit different with technology.
So if you think back to when you were younger, of course, injuries were different. That was one thing you went through. And you think of even like the recruiting process. What's some of those things that you could take from what you experienced and now you're going through with your own son, that maybe some people, like I always say, like, my message is, if I can deliver to people one thing that they haven't experienced. I mean, I didn't go through the recruiting process as myself. So I think sometimes when you can get an aspect of recruiting from someone who has lived in recruiting at any level and then live it with their own kid, it's kind of awesome to get the comparisons and get some insight to going, okay, maybe this might help someone else in their process.
Yeah, I think the most important aspect is patience. I went to the school I went to was like a Class B size school. And I was good enough where, you know, we ended up being a playoff team. We ended up being a good team eventually. I led the team in tackles, those type of things. So I had the stats behind it. I always joke that, you know, somehow, some way, God hit an upgrade button with my son, because he's smarter than me, he's better looking than me, better hair, taller than me, faster than me.
Thank you, Megan.
Exactly.
The wife.
Shout out to the wife. Yeah, you know, definitely. So it's been unique watching that, because I was a 4-year starter because I went to a smaller high school. In Ty's situation being, he would be a 2-year starter. He tore his ACL, meniscus, MCL, second game of the year last year. So he missed his entire junior year for football and baseball. Was lucky enough to get on this field a little bit this summer with baseball, and is fully recovered, ready to go. But the recruiting process, the things that are similar is, hey, you have to be patient. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. It's a lot like dating, you know, and it's, hey, you're trying to find a fit for you too. So it's not only does that school love me? Like, does that person, that guy or that girl like me? Do I like them back? You know, and is that a place I see myself? And, you know, I think too many times we chase things because we think that's what's best for us without looking at truly how it's going to affect me and what it really is. It's like, okay, I want to be D1. Well, why? What school? Like, why that school? Why those 3 schools? Are we chasing status? Are we chasing playing time? Are we chasing a love of the sport? And those things haven't changed. You know, like, kids were like that when we were growing up. You know, I remember being on the sideline for the big schools, and like, you come, you know, Colorado State or Wyoming, and you do like a game day visit, and you come back to school, and you were like, everyone thought you were the coolest thing in the world. They're like, oh, dude, you were on the sideline. Like, yeah, okay. First and foremost, I was on the sideline because my cousin was a stud, and they liked the family name, and they were like, okay, we can invite this kid and keep the family happy. Yeah, like it's McDougal family. He'll be okay. So, for me, it was a little different from that standpoint. I ended up, walking on at a school. It ended up not working out. I ended up transferring to an NAIA school and actually playing as opposed to sitting the bench. And I tell everybody, like, football gave me everything I have so far in my life. Without football, I grew up in the inner city. Um, I would not have had the opportunities I've had, wouldn't have met the friends I had, would not have met my wife, would not be in the state of Nebraska, which, strangely enough, a guy from Colorado, I love this place. I love the community feel. I love those things. I do miss the mountains a little bit, but like it brought me so much. And as I'm seeing my son go through it, it's frustrating, right? Like he has the things that a lot of coaches want. He has the size. He's 6'2" plus. He has the weight. He's over 205. He just tested out his 10-yard dash, his vertical. Those things are where these coaches want it at a high level. But he has one game and 2 series of varsity play, and I think that's the film and those type of things leaved out. They want to see how he's going to work, and so that patience aspect of it all is something not just for him but for other athletes. Like, hey, yeah, these schools are going to offer, and they're going to offer guys that you think you're better than, and they're going to offer guys that you scratch your head about, and they're going to offer guys that are way better than you too, by the way. Like that all is there, and your job is to stay true to yourself, to stay patient, understand that in the end it's going to work out. Because I took a scholarship offer and it was taken away at the last minute, and I walked onto a place, and then I ended up at a place that was perfect for me and perfect for where my life needed to be. And so even that winding road that I had in my recruitment process led me to where I need to be. And those are things I try to impress upon these kids, is like, you can work through this. And with the new NIL rules and the new scholarship rules and everything else, there's a lot of transferring. There's a lot of things that go on. And the first thing you need to do is find out, where do you fit? And I saw it firsthand. I worked in college admissions, worked at Creighton University, and I used to I would meet with a lot of volleyball players, a lot of baseball players. And when they would come visit campus on the academic side, I would tell them, like, hey guys, you've got to fall in love with the school and like the program. If you love them both, perfect fit. But love the school first, because the school's not going to change. Creighton's been there since 1878 or whatever it is, and it's not changing. Ty went out to Yale for camp 1701, 75 years before we were a country. Yale's not changing, man. Do you love Yale or do you like the program? Like, those things, those schools aren't changing, guys. So find the place that you love, and hopefully you love that program too, because coaches change, situations change, friendships change, those things change. But that school is not going to change at all.
Well, and then also I think for you, which is key, through the years you've went to coaching, you've been able to step away for coaching, whether it's job related or just life in general. And you've been able to be dad for one moment. You've been able to jump back to coach. But when it comes to the kids that you've impacted through the time that I've known you, every kid is like your own son, just as most coaches. How do you separate being coach and being dad, and especially with having a son? Because I know we had this conversation, because when I first met you, my son was just starting tackle football at a young age. And of course, you went through an injury, and you and your wife made a decision and said, that might not be for our son yet. And you made him hold out. So you had to be like your father, not, hey, coach, I want to get back into football. How do you kind of distinguish those, and what's some of the things that you really use in your favor to make sure that it's always trying to give the best advice, but also realizing that you have a son going through the same thing and he's going to need that advice too?
I would say that's hard. Like so I never intended to coach Ty ever. The first couple of things where it's just t-ball or soccer, sure, I'll go do that. But the first time he played competitive baseball, I was not coaching. I did not do it. His first year playing tackle football, I was in the stands. I think somehow it like gravitated towards me, and it ended up being something that I did. But the separation there as a dad and your kid is trying to keep it as much when we're at the practice field, when we're in a game field. It's him as a player. It's Ty, and it's coach. It's not dad and son, and that's a tough balance. And there's times where, man, he's batting low in the lineup, and I'm like, man, he's like third on our team in batting average. And the dad part goes in your head. It's like, dude, he's batting 450 right now. Why is he not batting third? Like those things go in your head. And then it's, as a coach, it's like, okay, well, we have him here for this reason. We have him there for that. Football, same thing. Like, man, like, I famously in our household, and he knows, I didn't start him as an 8th grader on the defensive side of the football field. He was our backup linebacker, and he was our pass rushing defensive end, and he came in situations, and he was not a starter. And he, like you said, he came to the game late. We didn't start tackle football till 6th grade with him. He was still learning the game. He was still figuring it out, and I was perfectly happy with that. But I think that gives some credibility to the people around you too, and makes it easier when your kid, you're not trying to make your kid the star, and coaching your kid is easiest if they're either the worst on the team or the best on the team, hands down, right? Because when they are, then if they're playing, there's no question. Ty's a late bloomer. Ty's young for his age. Ty, as a freshman, was 5'6", 140 pounds, 6'2", 205 now. Like, he was a late bloomer. So it wasn't, he was competitive enough. He was athletic enough. He worked hard enough to make it awkward, if you will. Like, it was like, I had to have questions. I had to have talks. Like, his freshman year, we're freshman A team, B team, football team. I'm asking the other coaches, like, okay, as a coach, this is what I like about him. This is what I like about this kid. And I literally went, here's this kid, here's kid A, here's kid B. Which one do we start? And because I didn't want a name to it. Here's the attributes of this kid, here's the attributes of that kid. And the first couple of games we had him rotating, and those things I think are important, to try to be true to what you want in your players, who they are. You leave it as much as you can at the field. And I'm not great at it all the time, and I wasn't. There were times where we had knockdown, drag-out fights at home because I'm watching film, because Huddle, you can watch it at home now. Like, my dad had to at least watch it at school most of the time, right? Although my dad did wake me up one time at 2 o'clock in the morning because my head was on the wrong side of a tackle that a kid was able to get an extra yard, got a first down. I'm like, Dad, I dove for him, but he literally woke me up out of bed at 2 a.m. We did win that game too, which is also, he was just trying to nitpick. He didn't want us feeling too good about ourselves. But I've avoided that. But, you're watching film and you're going through stuff, and it's like, dude, we've been over this. And it's so easy with him within like arm's reach to be like, dude, take me through this play. What were you thinking? And that's when someone awesome like Megan steps in and is like, no, bro, no. Like that's a football conversation, not a dad conversation right now. And she puts the, her 5'5", 110 pounds, puts the smack down on both of us. And I think that's the interesting part, is trying to balance that, trying to be, because as a dad, I would be coaching him up on those things in real life, right? Like, even if I'm not his coach, I'm going to look at his huddle. I'm going to take him through it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to break it down with him and be like, yo, man, it's 3rd and short. You should have been downhill, ready to go. Like, why are you popping here? I mean, just little things like that I would be talking to him no matter what. And they become coach conversations in the house. So trying to stay away from that. Baseball's, it's a mind trip of a game. And, playing at, AAA and majors level growing up and playing on a really good competitive team, it was very hard at times to just let the car ride happen, especially because, as you know, Ty, he's ultra competitive. He is ultra hard on himself. He used to famously throw away our second and third place medals. Like we
Hey,
and
Kendall
that's not
asks all the time. He goes, I remember, and you probably remember this, we got a ring for Nebraska versus Iowa, and I don't even know, we might have won one game. Kendall looks at the ring and goes, what did we get this for? We didn't win anything. And like most kids don't understand that simple concept of we didn't win nothing. This doesn't mean nothing.
No, we try to you try to celebrate wins. You try to celebrate those things too. When they were 12, we were on a really good run. Running back from Papillion-LaVista Monarchs, graduated last year, Jordan Barrientos, was on this team, hits a couple home runs in this line drive tournament in Des Moines. And we're playing Millard Hitman. Dylan Cool, who's the linebacker for Millard South, is on that team, not to mention a couple other really good athletes. On our team on the mound that day, probably Brett Holscher at times, committed to Nebraska. Good little battle. But we win this game in extra innings. Jordan hits, he either hit a walk-off home run, something to that effect. And everyone's making this group of kids take this picture. And you see all these kids, Mason Schroeder, who pitches at Papillion South, CJ Sterling, who pitches at Papillion Monarchs. All these kids are looking and they're like, man, this is 6th place or 7th place. We didn't make it says champion, but we made the silver bracket. This is like 6. And there's the picture is hilarious because they're all just looking at the medal like, what is this? Alex Cogswell, who plays for Gross High, is a wide receiver there. The picture is hilarious because he's looking down. Jordan's turning back to everybody, and they're just all looking at this like, why is this say first place? I mean, that's the competitive type of kids that he was involved with and was around. And, like you said, they played in that Ty did the same thing. I don't even know if Ty would have that ring to this day. They were one of the top 4 teams or whatever, and they played one of the top 4 teams from Iowa, and we went 1-3 or something. We played horrible. And all of them were like, why did I get a ring? Exactly like K-Dub did, right? Like it was that. And they were 9, by the way, when that happened. So that's how early their brains were on that. And so when you have kids like that and your kids like that, trying to stay as silent as possible in the car on the way home is hard because I wanted to follow all those parenting advices of don't say a word in the car, let them, get them the ice cream, make them feel good, all that stuff. And we're a competitive family, we're competitive people. And he gets in there and I'm not saying a word. He's like, man, I played like heck. I stunk today. Like I did this. And he's breaking down stuff. And it's like, okay, we've got to get to a positive or neutral mindset here, bud. Like, look, yeah, you went 0 for 2, but you did this. And he's like, don't patronize me. He's like, no, man, like,
don't pat my back for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting to see how it's played out because football and baseball are 2 very different games, as you know. And he is 2 very different type of competitor in both those sports. It's kind of a mind trip to watch.
Well, what I want to get also from a parent, a father, a coach like yourself is you went through a rough injury that made you decide for your family the way that you wanted football to come to or not come to. Obviously, Ty had that injury last year. What was probably some of the scariest things or things that went through your head? Because obviously, I don't know your wife in this aspect, but I'm guessing she might not have went through something of that aspect growing up when it comes to sports. And not many families do unless you're very into it like yourself. And being able to, one, not only get Ty on the right mental, but also yourself because you're like, this is why, I know he's where he wants to be. I know this is what he wants to do, but this is why I was kind of iffy. I've already been here. I've done this. How do you kind of, one, go through the worst moment maybe you might have had in this situation, but also turn it into what you have shown lately for your son, just the progression and the growth mentally and physically that he's just endured that many can't get over that hump?
Yeah, it's one of those things where so when I was in college, I tore my patella tendon. I had a head injury. I've had I mean, honestly, like I love football, but I've had 12 surgeries that are football related, right? Which is part of the reason why it was, why we waited with Ty. And as I mentioned, Ty is 5'6", 140 as a freshman, and was like 5'6" when he was like in the fifth grade. I mean, he was tall early, and then he stopped growing for a while. And so, having that experience myself and knowing what it takes to get ready, knowing the mental fortitude to come back. The second he went down, like my head went to, I mean, right away I turned to Megan and I was like, he just tore his ACL. The second he grabbed his knee and went down, I knew it. And, going on that field and going down, and there's a picture, and it's, he's on the bench, and Ben Schaefer, who's will be a starting middle linebacker, just tremendous athlete. They've been teammates in baseball since, sixth grade, football since sixth grade. There's a picture, and it just Ben's heads down, because Ben's one of those kids that knows where Ty came from, knows how hard he worked, knows, Ty's freshman year, he ran a 5'6", and then he was running a 4'7" something when he got hurt. Like, he knows his vertical was a 22 and then it was a 32. Like, he knows what he put in. And I think that kind of, to me, was that's one of those kind of indelible things. And then even the love he got from, Jordan Barrientos and the Monarchs, who ended up tearing his ACL as well. Probably one of my favorite pictures is Jordan embracing Ty after, what is one of the most intense rivalry games in the state, Monarchs Titans, and them hugging it out there. When he got home, Ty was in denial for a long time. And when we finally got the, hey, this happened, ACL, meniscus, MCL, partially MCL, I think that when he heard those words, he finally kind of just knew, okay, my season's done. And he knew it, but he didn't grapple with it. I would say the toughest thing with these injuries, and we've been connected with a lot of families, is people don't know what it's like when, sports are a lot of kids' worlds, right? For Ty, sports is a big portion of his world. And we try to balance other things. He loves fishing. He's a 4.0 student. He does the right things that way. So it's not like football's his life and it's the only thing he does. But it does, especially I think at a big school, it's a big part of your identity. That's how kids know you. They know you as a football player. They know you as a baseball player, volleyball player. And I would say, like, he was just, you could tell, like, I don't know if he was like clinically depressed, but he was depressed, right? It hit him hard, and all the work and all the effort he had put in. And I would say the first time I saw Ty, like, again, where I'm like, okay, he's going to be okay, right, is when they gave him clearance to go in the weight room again. And it was literally like, hey, I get to lift. I get to do something right now. And it was obviously upper body at first, but when they gave him that clearance, it was great. And, I credit Papillion South strength and conditioning coach Kurt Pullman, right? Like, he was huge in making sure that when we were doing stuff this whole offseason, he modified it. He made sure Ty could do it with the team, because Ty needed his team. And then Bronson Marsh, who does Marsh Elite Performance, Ty goes to see him. And that's where he became him again, is those two men. I mean, I can't thank them enough, because I don't know, it's nothing I did, because, when you've coached your son since he's 7 years old and you have that relationship, at some point it's like, Dad's not smart anymore. Dad doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, we can have almost the same exact injury. I can have friends who've torn their ACLs. I can have you talk to all these people, but he's not going to, he's hard-headed. For as smart as he is, he's hard-headed. And, I wanted to, I'm like, man, hey, we've got to do this, that. And he's like, no, I got this. I've got it. I'm working with athletic training, but most importantly, I'm working with Bronson Marsh and Kurt Pullman. And those two guys, I'll tell everybody to my dying day, if anybody ever says a bad word about Kurt Pullman as a strength and conditioning coach at Papio South, I will have words with him, because that man, he's helped Coach Tarman and that volleyball team become one of the most dominant volleyball teams in the state, maybe the country, right? Like, he does a great job with them, and, you know, gearing you're out there in the top, usually in the top 4, right? He helped resurrect Ty and got him on the right path. And there's been several other people, young ladies, Cam Bales, who's a freshman there. She tore her ACL in volleyball. She's a volleyball basketball player. He's got her on the right path too. And, you know, there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of people that have to surround them to kind of get them in the right spot. But that mindset stuff, Ty's a different cat. And he's like, I can outwork anything. And that's just the way he works. And so, like, listening to Dad, it's like, Dad, when our dad's like, take it easy, it's like, no, I'm going to outwork it. And I really give, as much as I'd like to take a lot of credit for it, it's Kurt Pullman and Bronson Marsh through and through. And if you ever talk to either one of those two guys, Bronson, of course, was a state championship winning quarterback at Millard South, went to Kearney. Kurt Pullman, small town all-star, went to Nebraska Wesleyan. Their mindset is the same way. Like I'd love to take credit for Ty's mindset. Ty's it comes from those guys. And I see Kurt's mindset, especially in some of those other athletes, like that Cam Bales and people like that, where you see them like they're like, yeah, we got this. It's like, you know, and I love to see that part. But that's the hardest part, was seeing, like, hey man, I mean, I will say, if your kid's going through an injury, like, their friends will leave them for a while, right? Life goes on in high school, and no one does it on purpose.
It's like a job. You're replaceable. They're gonna, and if you can't do the same thing that they're doing, they're just doing the same thing they were doing. It's not like they're like, we're kicking you out. It's just a matter of, they're still going through their routine. They're still living the same life. They don't have to change. They don't have to do, like you said, just recently when he was having to do adjusted workouts, they're still doing their full workouts. So they're like, I want to help them, but they just can't give that effort back to them at that time, because they're working on themselves. And we obviously just had, we honestly just had Eli Hammond on our show, another Colorado guy that you might know in the area. And he also talked a lot about Kurt, because that is what has really pushed him to take the strength and conditioning so serious. He went back and he's getting his master's, and he's getting all this stuff done, because and he's showing it over there at Omaha Northwest, where these kids need it. They need to believe in that coach, that they can get them from A to B. And when you have success stories like Ty and Bales out at Papio South with Kurt and obviously other help. But think of even when you were a kid, like, these opportunities from these trainers, these people that are professionals, was not around to get you into that mindset. You had to find your own mindset. So I think sometimes parents, out of I don't know if it's they think they know, or they just are so afraid to want to pass that on to someone else. This is a coach. This is a father here letting you know it's okay to say, I want my son in the best hands that we can find him. Help me out. And there's plenty across the state. These are two, obviously, Marsh and Pullman, that have made impact on you guys. And when you think of everything that is done, how did the wife go through all this? And how, as a husband, were you able to? Because I say it because even being a coach myself, obviously I coached the Junior Titans for the longest time, Omaha South, and then kids in sports. The hardest thing is getting your wife on that page of because it's their baby. It's their young one. What was something that you could also pass along, maybe to a father that might be going through that instance where maybe their wife just isn't, they're not on the same page, but you can find a common way to make sure that you can get to when it comes to sport injuries?
I think, right away we're kind of locked in the same step. It's like, first and foremost, and I think this is something I haven't said, I mean, it's Ty's journey, not mine. Right? Like, this is Ty's, not Megan's journey. This is Ty's, not Mara or Skylar's journey or anybody else in the house. Like first and foremost, let's define what you want, man. And that's something we keep trying to come back to, because he's like, he's one of those type of kids where it's just like full go, 1,000 miles an hour. And it's like, sometimes like, hey, let's sit back. What is the goal? Like, what are we going for? What are you working for? And I would say the few times where we've been a little off, or like, as he was nearing, time where he was going to be okay, where they were going to clear him for certain things. And then it was like easing into that, because, we're both two working people. She's a school counselor. One of us would have to go to the doctor appointment with Dr. Arnold at Ortho, Nebraska, who is a stud. And the other person would have to stay behind. And so it's communicating what we hear, and what a 17-year-old hears is different too. Like, he's like, I'm cleared for this. It's like, no, that's not what he said. like
Trust me, I went through that with my dad, when my mom was going through stuff, or even with my dad. Like, my wife is like, I'm going to go to the appointment so I get the 100 words correctly, instead of let me take it from, and nothing against my dad. He's just getting older, and the high details. I do it for my age, and I'm just middle-aged. You know what I'm saying? Like, us guys don't take the information fully in. We just hear what we want to. Oh, you're almost there. You get to do. You can do. And you're like, hold on. Let me have the wife come in, take the real notes of the call or the situation, and then let's hash it out.
And then me as a competitor, like, I'm like, all right, man, like, if you feel good about it, let's roll, bud. Like, let's do this, right? Like, so it was March, and they cleared him to start hitting baseballs again, right? Now, there's a whole program that you start after you tear your ACL, because his was his back leg. You're turning on it, and it's, like, you got to hit 20 balls a day and 30 balls a day, and it's off a tee, and it's controlled environment. You're all this stuff. And, he does that for a couple weeks, and then it's like, okay, he feels like, okay, I can turn it loose, and mom's like, hey, let's be careful. And then part of me is like, let's see what happens here, like, let's go. And like, which is the dumbest thing ever, by the way. Like, there's a reason why.
Yeah, fathers, don't do that.
No, and we didn't do that. Like, but he's got a friend who's committed to Valparaiso, Grant Gilbreth, and he's a high level, obviously D1 high level athlete, and they played on the same team with your son years ago, and they go into Wired, actually, and they decide we're going to crank up the machine today and see how many balls we can hit. And Ty's feeling good. He's ripping it. Feels like normal, and according to him and Grant, he's hitting over 100 exit velos, feeling good about it. Well, the next day it's like, my knee doesn't feel right, and then you're just like,
the step back.
Yeah.
And how do you explain that to them? Because, of course, like you said, you're letting them be kids. You're letting them make the mistake. You can't go and I had one of my foremen actually just say it the other day, because obviously our oldest just moved out. So our first kid officially moved out. And he's like, you can't go back with "I told you so." You can tell them what you feel and give them the guidance. You got to let them fail. But how do you go back to correct it without, because parents do it all the time. I told you so. I told you if you did that, you're going to have that. How did you guys go about that? And how did the McDougals handle that one?
Oh, it's still a battle. Like, we battled the other day. So Ty, he that set him back, and he couldn't hit. As he comes back to baseball, we go into with Dr. Arnold, and he said, hey, Ty's really close. He's doing all this. You do this test out with Creighton Athletic Performance Center. They hook you up to wires. It's cool, right? It totally looks like you're stuck in a video game, and they move you around and do some cool stuff with you. But we get that in May. It's like, hey, he's close. Give me a call in 2 weeks if he thinks he's ready, right? So, we're 2 weeks on the dot. And Ty's like watching summer baseball after watching spring baseball, and he's like, I'm good to go. Like, I can do this. He goes, you should see me at practice. I'm hitting it. I'm running well. I'm doing all this stuff. The problem is, right, is like, you feel good, but it's the consistency and it's the endurance and those things that you're not quite ready for. And Megan and I, that's probably where we started to I'm like, yeah. So, I called Dr. Arnold. I'm like, feels good. Dr. Arnold's like, yeah, let's go. And the first weekend he plays in a few games and, the knee swells again. And then it's kind of like, I told you guys, like, what's up, and, I think there's a tough balance. And I don't know if Megan and I are going to be able to sit next to each other in the stands on Friday nights. Because I know my reaction every time he gets hit, and I'm going to try to stay calm, but I won't be able to. And then every time, it's until it feels comfortable, it's going to be a little weird. And even in baseball, when he dived for a ball, and you're like, and he's not a small guy, and he gets up and he's like getting up slow, or and then tweaks something, or doesn't feel right. And there was a lot of hey man, we've got to be careful. What is your final goal? What is your end goal? There was a lot of discussion over, should you play baseball this summer? Even if you're cleared, we had a lot of those discussions, and ultimately it's tough to keep a competitor off the field. And he was lucky enough. He had baseball coaches who let him get on the field. Coach Lynham, Coach Bales, Coach Polinsky, all, at Papio South, they let him get on the field. And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't good. It was frustrating for him, frustrating for mom and dad to not see him be able to do what he does, right? To not see it at the same level yet. And that was frustrating. But the cool thing is hey man, he got to be a part of a state championship Legion team. And he started in the state championship game. He was out there contributing, and maybe it didn't look the same. Maybe it wasn't as dominant it was as a JV player the year before. It didn't look the same, but he was out there competing. But in all those moments, every time he got up slow, every time there was swelling, every time he didn't eat right or take the right supplements or recover right after the game, and if he was sore the next day, I'll tell you what, the I told you so's came out pretty quick. Hey dude, this is different. This isn't just your 17-year-old body. You got to rock and roll and you're ready to roll. You have to prepare. And I will say, he's a dedicated kid and he does a good job of it. We're at a tournament in Arkansas and he's waking up before everybody else, and he's in the weight room when we're at a tournament in Arkansas, and he's lifting, but then also doing his knee prep and knee recovery and doing the things right. We go out to Yale for their camp, go down to, Northwest Missouri State, up to South Dakota State, any of those situations, he's taking the time to try to get the knee prepped and right. And some of those opportunities were limited because he wasn't cleared until a couple weeks ago. But he tried to do the right things, and we tried not to make him feel too bad when he wasn't doing it exactly right. But, he's got to deal with two parents with type A personalities. So, it's a tough balance. And I don't know how the season's going to go. And Megan's probably a better listener to him, and, is an advocate when he's going through things. I'm just like, hey, let's ice it, let's heat it, let's compress it, let's do whatever we can to help you. And sometimes I probably have to close my mouth, open my ears, listen to him, and try to help him kind of figure out what is best for him, as opposed to forcing whatever empirical data I read on some study. Everybody's body's a little different.
So we look at last year, of course, you were coaching football for the high school. This year you took it off for work reasons, and the important thing, because that's always something I've always told people, anybody can be a coach, but to be a coach and understand that whether you could be there all the time or not be there all the time is a whole different story, especially with these kids nowadays. They need that regular guidance, because if they don't, then all of a sudden they lose a day or two because you weren't there or whatever. What is the difference for you to come out senior year for your son and know that you get to be dad? And after this year, he's done with high school. He's done with local sports. And you get to be that girl dad. What is your thoughts going through this year, and how are you going to really embrace and live in these moments?
Yeah, I say that it was, it's a tough decision. I kind of knew the writing was on the wall last year with the way my job was working. So I kind of had a good feel that was going to be my last year coaching for a while. And that current sophomore class, last year's freshman class at Papio South, coaching them was a joy. Those some very talented kids, and kind of hard to step away from, but also I'm the type of guy, like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to go 100% at it. And if I can't pour that in, then it doesn't make sense to me. And it's never easy to step away from something that you enjoy doing and love doing. And just being around the energy of high school students, my former job working in college, I tell everybody, I think two of the most energetic places in the world, if you ever need your cup filled, go to a high school, go to a college. And I know some people are like, high school is the worst. I didn't like going to high school, but I'm telling you, as an observer, when you come back with knowledge and you see the joy and you see what goes on, you see how hard those teachers work and what they pour into your child every day. Like, man, I wave the flag, whatever banner that needs to be waved for teachers and coaches, because they pour in way more than a normal human to people that, they're not their blood. I mean, they're people, they go to bed worrying about your kid, and they think about your kid all the time. And I think as a coach, that was one of the more powerful things is, it is waking up at 2:00 in the morning and being like, man, I hope that kid's okay. Like, that stuff happens. So stepping away from it this year, it's interesting because I have a really close relationship with all those coaches, coaching with them for years. And Tim Clemenger at Papio South has done a good job of being around the youth programs too. So when I was volunteering youth football and he does huge football camps, and he does a great job trying to make sure that people know who he is and talking to the youth organization. So he's been around, he's seen these kids grow up. The majority of that program, that senior class, has played together since the 6th, 7th grade, and they have a lot of depth. They have a lot of good athletes out there. And so stepping away from that, it's kind of hard being a part of that and seeing those kids grow up and grow together. I am excited to, not know as much as I have in the past. So, we were at North Platte last year in the opening game. And I mean, Ty had a really good game, and we're there, and he didn't break down right. He actually, to be very honest, I think he actually hit the wrong hole completely on a blitz. Like, they were trying to open up a C gap type situation for him, and I don't know what he saw or what he did, but he went inside, running back popped out to his gap, gained probably 12 yards, and I'm turning to Megan being like, what is he doing there? I mean, just because, like, I was the defense coordinator of the freshman, I know what we're trying to do. I see the calls getting called in. I know exactly what's happening. And then even being in the booth for varsity games a few times, like, seeing that and breaking it down, it'll be interesting to just sit back and watch and hopefully take that cap off completely. I'm praying for that. I don't know how well I'm going to do at it. Like, to be very honest. But I think I just want to see him smile out there. I just want to see him play. I just want to see him run down that field. August 30th, when they play the Monarchs, the game means so much to these kids in Papillion. And I tell everybody, it's, growing up in Denver, there were some big rivalries, right? My first Nebraska high school football game that I ever attended was Millard North, Millard South. So I've seen, like, rivalries, right? Like, my wife went to West Side. I have a lot of friends that coached and played at, prep, and I've seen that rivalry. And I mean, it's up there, right? Papillion South, Papillion High. And for him to be able to get on that field after missing out on that last year, I know that means the world to him. And for me, that's just going to give me a smile, and seeing kids on both sides of the field that they grew up with, playing basketball and baseball and football together. I think, to me, that's going to mean a lot. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's going to be fun being a dad, just to be able to take that all in and see all those kids out there and know that, hey, I'm rooting for all of them, even though I want obviously that scoreboard to be in Titans' favor, but like you've grown up with them. Like, I mean, there's a couple of them that they're at my house, a couple times a week sometimes. I mean, I always tell everybody it's truly like a Civil War type situation in Papillion, because it'll be brother against brother in some way when they go out there. So that'll be fun. But that's, I mean, from that aspect, that's one of the cool parts. The girls, it's cool. I tell everybody one of the cooler things to watch in the state of Nebraska, and I'm serious. I'm like, as a football guy, my daughter's in show choir. She's Titanium, which is like one of their show choirs at Papillion.
Hey, we talked about it on this show already. We had Caden Frederick, who is up at South Dakota State doing work. Like, it is a sport. The amount of time that they put in, and I mean, they do stretches before the amount of things that they put in a 12-15 minute show, you can't match. I mean, it's just like a 60-minute game. You know what I'm saying? It's that much intensity, it's that much energy, and by the end of the night, and they have to be there at 5 a.m. And on a Saturday, they won't even get done and home until 1 a.m. or 2.
Yeah.
So trust me, I'm on that same boat as you. I had 3 girls that went through it. It's amazing to see what these kids get to do. And I always tell parents, like, if you have a kid that's looking for activities, there's a couple out there that are really bonding to the school and bonding to a group of kids that you're like, these kids are special. Yeah. Show choir is one of them, because they all want everybody to do good. Yes, they want to win, but they want everybody, and they want to see goodness. And then the second thing is, it goes back to Kurt. Thank you for him having me not just watch my daughter do it, but then also DJ last year, the powerlifting in the area. Everybody wants to see Kiki go lift the most. And at some schools, she could be the one that someone might make fun of or treat terribly. But on that mat, and when she shows up to these powerlifting, she is the queen. She is the number one person that everybody wants to be around. They want to flock around it. They want to see her do something so amazing that I can't even do. And I'm a grown man. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're like, these kids are doing things that us as adults we could do. As we're wrapping up here, getting closer, and we'll get you out of here on this. Of course, your dad left a legacy back in Colorado with coaching. You came to Nebraska. You found your home. You found where you are. You've done coaching through your years between baseball, football. Your goal was not to follow in Dad's footsteps, from what I know of you. What legacy and what is TJ looking to leave here, as you've already touched so many kids? Of course, some of them are going to graduate here shortly. You had a big group graduate last year. What is the legacy that TJ's leaving? And also, is TJ going to get back in that coaching booth maybe later on?
Well, I think for me, it's just I hope that every kid that I've coached knows that the door is always open for them. Like, I used to tell the kids when they were little, like, hey man, when we're in a season, I want you. I called it ACE, and attitude, character, and effort. And I hope that you bring that, and they brought that more to not just on the field, but to their life too. So for me, that's kind of where, if there's a legacy of coaching, it's just that those kids remember that, and that they bring that in everything that they do, and that they know that, hey, though, even if you fall short of that, the door's open and we can talk. And I'm never done with you. I'm never done coaching you. I'm never done. My door's always open, kind of like my dad's was. But there's kids that I haven't coached in a while that we text with, almost weekly. And I want to know how they're doing. I want to know the goods and bads. I want to know where they're heading. And it doesn't have to be, like, it's cool. Like, Brett Holscher's cool. Like, he's going to play he's going to pitch D1 level. That's cool. Right. But I also want to know, when you get your first job, I want to know, that, what's going on, where you're going to college, whether you're pitching or whether you're playing linebacker there, whatever you're doing. I want to know those things about you. And I think that was the best thing about coaching freshmen. And is that some of those kids, that was the only time they played football in their life. Sometimes it was the only time that they played competitive sports in high school. That was it for them. Sometimes it was a stepping stone to something greater for a lot of them. Man, I don't care, man. If it's at High V and I coach you and I see you working there, I'm going to say hi, and I hope you feel comfortable doing that same thing too. It's truly genuine. I want to know how life's doing. And for me, that's the biggest thing is like, once you get done with sports, it's such a limited time that we have to get to play at a competitive level. Once you get done, I just hope that you took away, like, this is the right way to do stuff. And I can compete with you. I can want to beat you on the field, but I can still be a gentleman off the field. I can still be cool off the field. And I would say, I hope the lasting lesson I always had with freshman athletes, especially football players, is I wanted them to be gentlemen off the field as much as possible. It's not always there in all of them. I want it to be. But one thing that I always did at the beginning of every year is explain to them that, like, hey, this field here, inside these white lines, this is one place where you get to be tough, right? You get to, like, throw it out there. And I would tell them, and I know this is kind of dorky, but I would say, look, your football helmet, man, that's like your superhero mask. This is your cape, it's your lightsaber, whatever the heck you want to call it, right? Like, and so I would usually have them stand outside that white line, and I have their helmet off, and I'm like, out here, we are a gentleman, we're a scholar, right? We bring the right attitude, character, and effort in what we're doing and how we're living. We treat women with respect. We treat our friends with respect. We treat other people with respect in general. Like, not just because a lot of times we focus on team, but like, no, treat your teachers with respect, please. They're going through a lot. Teach your parents with respect. They're a lot of times doing everything they can to put you in the right position to succeed. Treat those other classmates with respect. They're going through things you might never know, man. Like, high school's tough, man. Like, it is. And I'd sit there and they would sit outside the line, and it's like, okay, out here, we're a gentleman, we're good. And then I would have them step on the field, put their helmet on. I'm like, there's your mask, man. You're Batman, right? Over here, you're this way. Here, you're Batman. You're Clark Kent now. Now you're Superman. Like that's the way. I hope they remember that, because in business, in your job, a lot of times you're competing. You're doing stuff. I want you to attack it. I want you to be tenacious, but I also want you to be kind. The biggest inspiration outside, obviously, like my family, was my high school football, baseball coach, Mr. Mike Gabriel. So I alluded to my high school football team being so bad that when they went 500, my 8th grade year, it said, holy cow, Holy Family's 500. When he took over the program, he was the offensive coordinator, line coach at that point. When he became the head coach our junior year of high school, he pulled us all in. And he said, look, guys, I'm not the best football coach in the world. Right? He played collegiately, he played D2, Western State in Colorado. But he's like, I'm going to surround myself with the best people possible, and I'm going to hold you guys to a level of accountability that you need. And my junior year, we went right below 500. We had a lot of talent. We should have been better. And he helped reassess. He gave a lot of power to the players. He gave us a lot of leadership things. My senior year, we went 7-2 in the regular season. Best winning that we had done as a team in 30 plus years. From that point on, the next 10 years, they missed the playoffs, I think, one time. They won 2 state championships. And since then, that time frame, 1996, so however old that is, almost 30 years, right? They've only missed the playoffs 4 times in that time span. And his son is now the head coach of that team, Holy Family Catholic High School. The field is named after his dad that he coaches on. And they've done it the right way the majority of the time, and he put people first. He put kids first, probably more than his family sometimes, and he balanced that. And that's a school that has moved up as far as size goes too. Colorado, there's 5 classes, and we were right in the middle. And, they've moved up and they've competed higher level and higher level. And it's not just the winning that he did, it's how he did it. He did it by making you feel like you were part of a family. He made you feel like you were important, whether you were the third string kicker or the starting quarterback. And he did it by acknowledging his strengths. And he was kind of the ultimate motivator, man. And I think in high school sports, that's so needed, man. You need that person lighting that fire. And he lit some fires, and it wasn't fire and brimstone. It wasn't cursing. It was never cursing. In fact, I think the worst thing he ever said was Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Legit. At least to us, him and my dad, you'd hear him yawking it up, and he'd say stuff, probably wrong. But Mr. Mike Gabriel, by far, like, he is that guy. And tell everybody, just Google him and see what he did there, because there's nothing short of impressive. And that's what I try to tell every kid and every family when they talk about their high school experience and their coaches. I'm like, man, it just takes one guy to believe in his team and believe in themselves, and it's amazing what can happen. And things can get turned around in a heartbeat. And that guy did it, and he lived it, and that program is amazing.
They're still doing it today.
Yep.
That's a good mic drop to end it on. Once again, I appreciate TJ McDougal, former coach of the local area here in Omaha, along with a father. And once again, I'm out here at Hurrdat Sports Bar in La Vista. Make sure to come out this Saturday at 6 p.m. for the Omaha Beef. They're going to celebrate their championship, and we're glad that Hurrdat Sports Bar gets to host it. Once again, Wired Access Podcast, DJ K-Dub Omaha, part of the Hurrdat Sports Production. We'll see you next time.